In 1527, a physician named Paracelsus publicly burned the texts of Galen and Avicenna, the pillars of medieval medicine. He declared that ancient medicine was wrong, that new methods were necessary, that empirical observation surpassed dogmatic tradition. 3 years later, he was dead under suspicious circumstances at 48 years of age. His manuscripts were confiscated. His discoveries about medicinal chemistry and experimental treatments disappeared from public records for decades. Only fragments survived, secretly copied by students who risked their lives to preserve the knowledge he tried to share. And here's the question that should haunt us. How many other physicians suffered the same fate? How many medical discoveries were erased from history because they challenged institutional authority? How many effective treatments were lost forever simply because someone with power decided that this knowledge was too dangerous to exist? And what would have happened if these cures had been preserved and developed over the following centuries instead of being systematically destroyed? By the end of this investigation, you'll understand exactly what was destroyed and why. You'll discover that physicians of antiquity possessed extraordinarily advanced pharmacological knowledge. You'll learn how the Inquisition confiscated and burned medical texts for centuries. You'll see the archaeological evidence of treatments that worked but were erased from the historical record. And you'll understand why this knowledge was considered so threatening that it needed to be eliminated completely. But before we begin, subscribe to this channel now. Why? Because the type of truth we're about to reveal rarely survives on modern platforms. Content that questions established narratives about powerful institutions tends to disappear from search results. Algorithms are programmed to push these investigations down. So subscribe, activate notifications, and ensure you'll have access to knowledge that was deliberately hidden for centuries. Let's start with verifiable and documented facts. In the year 79 of the Common Era, a volcanic eruption destroyed the Roman cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum. These cities remained buried under meters of ash and solidified lava for almost 1,700 years. When archaeological excavations began in the 18th century, researchers made extraordinary discoveries. Entire buildings were preserved. Frescoes remained intact. Everyday objects survived perfectly. And among these objects were medical and surgical instruments of remarkable precision, scalpels with extremely thin blades, obstetric forceps that resemble ancient versions of tools still used today, vaginal speculums of sophisticated design, bronze catheters, instruments for eye surgeries, tools for cranial trepanation. All of this, manufactured with metal, worked with impressive skill almost 2,000 years ago. But the instruments were only part of the discovery. Researchers also found containers that held residues of medicinal substances. Modern chemical analyses identified complex pharmaceutical compounds, mixtures of plant extracts combined with minerals, preparations that demonstrate sophisticated knowledge of chemistry and pharmacology. And here's what should make you stop and think. These Romans weren't just experimenting randomly with plants. They possessed systematic knowledge about which substances produced which effects. They knew how to extract active compounds. They understood dosages. They had developed a functional pharmacology based on centuries of documented empirical observation and experimentation. Now consider this. Rome didn't invent this knowledge from nothing. The Romans inherited and expanded Greek medicine. The Greeks, in turn, had absorbed knowledge from ancient Egypt, from Mesopotamia, from Persia. There was a continuous medical tradition that extended for thousands of years, each generation building on the knowledge of the previous one. Ancient physicians documented their observations. They wrote treatises on anatomy, on the functioning of the human body, on diseases and their treatments. They compiled vast pharmacopoeias listing hundreds of medicinal plants and their applications. And all of this was meticulously recorded in manuscripts that circulated among scholars and were copied and preserved in libraries throughout the Mediterranean basin. So here's the obvious question: where are these texts now? If first-century Romans possessed such advanced medical knowledge, if this knowledge was documented in writing, if there were entire libraries dedicated to preserving these manuscripts, what happened to them? Why did medieval medicine, 1,000 years later, seem so primitive in comparison? Why were European physicians of the Middle Ages using leeches and believing that diseases were caused by imbalance of bodily humors, when clearly much more sophisticated knowledge existed centuries before? The answer is that the knowledge was deliberately destroyed. And it wasn't an accident. It was a systematic campaign of suppression that lasted for centuries. Let me give specific and documented examples. In the year 391, an imperial edict was issued ordering the destruction of pagan temples. These temples weren't just places of worship. Many functioned as healing centers. Priest-physicians practiced medicine in these locations. They maintained libraries with ancient medical texts.
They trained new practitioners. When the temples were destroyed, their libraries were burned along with them. Medical manuscripts that had been preserved for centuries disappeared in flames. The knowledge they contained was lost. And this wasn't an isolated event. It happened repeatedly in different regions during decades of forced conversion. In the year 415, one of the most tragic figures in ancient history was murdered in Alexandria. Hypatia was a mathematician, astronomer, and philosopher. She also taught medicine and maintained a private library with scientific texts. She was dragged from her chariot by a fanatical religious mob, stripped naked. Her skin was torn off with sharp shells, and her body was dismembered. Why? Because she represented ancient pagan knowledge, because she taught empirical methods of investigation, because she was a woman with intellectual authority at a time when that was becoming unacceptable. After her murder, her library was looted. Her manuscripts disappeared. Nobody knows exactly what was lost, but we know she possessed rare copies of medical and scientific texts that didn't survive anywhere else. And this was just the beginning. In the following centuries, as a new orthodoxy consolidated, any knowledge associated with ancient traditions became suspect. Physicians who used methods inherited from pagan practitioners were accused of witchcraft. Women who knew medicinal herbs and practiced traditional healing were called witches and executed. Texts that described the human body in anatomical terms instead of moral terms were considered blasphemous. The dissection of human cadavers for anatomical study was prohibited. autopsies were considered desecration. Scientific investigation of the body was seen as violation of divine creation. For centuries, European medicine stagnated because religious authorities decided that certain types of knowledge were incompatible with approved doctrine. But the most systematic and devastating suppression came with the Inquisition. Beginning in the 13th century and continuing until the 19th century, inquisitorial tribunals operated throughout Europe with the power to investigate, judge, and execute anyone accused of heresy. And heresy was defined very broadly. It included not only unorthodox religious beliefs, but also healing practices that weren't approved by ecclesiastical medical authorities. If you healed people using methods the church didn't understand or control, you could be accused of witchcraft. If you possessed medical texts written by ancient pagan authors, you could be accused of promoting diabolical knowledge. And the punishment was confiscation of all your belongings, including your books, often followed by torture and execution. Records from Inquisition tribunals document thousands of cases of healers, midwives, and physicians being prosecuted. Their personal libraries were confiscated. Their manuscripts were examined by censors who determined if they contained heresy. If a text described treatments using medicinal plants in contexts that suggested ancient pagan practices, it was considered dangerous. If a manuscript contained detailed anatomical knowledge that seemed to come from illegal dissection of cadavers, it was condemned. If a medical treatise cited Greek or Arab authors known not to be Christian, it was suspect. And once a book was deemed heretical, it was publicly burned. The author was forced to watch the destruction of their work before being punished. Now, stop and think about what this means. For centuries, any physician who made an important discovery faced a terrible choice. He could document his discovery in writing, risk that the text would be discovered by authorities and be accused of heresy, or he could keep the knowledge secret, teaching only orally to trusted students, knowing that if something happened to him, the knowledge would die with him. Many chose the second option. They practiced effective medicine but didn't document their methods publicly. They developed treatments that worked but didn't publish the formulas. When these physicians died, their knowledge died with them because there was no written record that survived. How many cures were lost this way? How many effective treatments disappeared simply because the physician who discovered them was afraid to write about them? And there's more. Even when ancient medical texts survived, they were often deliberately mistranslated or censored. Greek and Arab manuscripts containing advanced medical knowledge existed in monastic libraries. Monks who could read these ancient languages sometimes made translations into Latin, but these translations went through censors who removed anything considered problematic. Detailed anatomical descriptions were simplified. Treatments involving substances associated with pagan practices were omitted. References to non-Christian authors were removed. The result was that even when ancient knowledge was partially preserved, it reached medieval physicians in corrupted and incomplete form. It was like trying to reconstruct a complex puzzle, having only half the pieces and all the instructions destroyed. Let me give a concrete example of medical knowledge that we know existed in antiquity but was lost and took centuries to be rediscovered. Ancient Greek physicians like Hippocrates and Galen described the use of fungal molds to treat infected wounds. They observed that certain types of mold, when applied to injuries, prevented infection and accelerated healing. They documented this in their medical treatises. This knowledge was available in antiquity, but during the European Middle Ages, this treatment disappeared completely from medical practice. Medieval physicians didn't use mold to treat infections. They didn't know it worked. The knowledge had been lost. It was only in 1928 that Alexander Fleming rediscovered the antibacterial properties of penicillium mold and developed penicillin. But ancient physicians already knew this 1,600 years earlier. If this knowledge had been preserved and developed, how many lives could have been saved during centuries of medieval epidemics? Or consider surgeries. Roman physicians performed complex surgical procedures. They operated on cataracts. They performed cesarean sections. They amputated limbs with techniques that minimized bleeding and infection. They used anesthetics made from plant extracts. All of this is documented in Roman medical texts that survived. But in medieval Europe, surgery was considered inferior work, unworthy of educated physicians. Surgeons were often barbers without formal training. Surgical procedures were performed without adequate anesthesia, with non-sterilized instruments, in conditions that guaranteed infection. The mortality rate was horrific. Soldiers often preferred to die from wounds rather than submit to amputation because they knew surgery would probably kill them anyway. Why? Because the advanced surgical knowledge of the Romans had been lost. The techniques they developed weren't transmitted. The texts that described these procedures in detail weren't available to medieval physicians because they had been destroyed or were locked in inaccessible archives. Before we continue deeper, I need you to leave a like on this video now. Why? Because this investigation is revealing truths that powerful institutions would prefer to keep hidden. Algorithms are programmed to suppress content that questions established historical narratives. The only way to ensure more people see this information is through direct engagement. So leave your like, share this video with someone who needs to know, and let's continue discovering together what was deliberately hidden from us. Now, let's examine specific evidence of advanced medical knowledge that survived in fragments and what this tells us about what was lost. In 1890, archaeologists excavating in Oxyrhynchus in Egypt discovered thousands of papyrus fragments. Among these fragments were pieces of Greek medical texts. One fragment described a treatment for tumors using a specific combination of plant extracts. Another fragment listed symptoms of a disease with remarkable diagnostic precision. Another described a surgical procedure with step-by-step instructions. These were clearly parts of larger medical treatises, but only fragments survived. The complete texts had been lost. And here's what's devastating. Some of these fragments describe treatments that modern medicine recognizes as effective. The chemical compounds in the plants mentioned have been identified and possess proven therapeutic properties. The procedures described make sense from a contemporary medical perspective. Ancient physicians knew what they were doing, but we have only pieces. The complete knowledge was destroyed. Or consider Arabic medical texts. During the so-called European Dark Ages, physicians in the Islamic world preserved and expanded Greco-Roman medical knowledge. They translated ancient texts into Arabic. They conducted their own research. They established sophisticated hospitals. They developed new treatments. Physicians like Avicenna and Reyes wrote comprehensive medical encyclopedias that compiled all available knowledge. These texts eventually reached Europe through Moorish Spain and were translated into Latin.
For a brief period, European physicians had access to this knowledge. But when the Spanish Inquisition expelled Moors and Jews from Spain, Arabic medical texts were included in the Index of Forbidden Books. Possessing copies of these texts was illegal. Studying them was heresy. Physicians who had been trained in this tradition were forced to flee or convert. Their knowledge was suppressed. Centuries of Arab medical advancement were deliberately erased from European medicine because they were associated with a non-Christian religion.
Consider also the loss of knowledge about women's health specifically. Midwives in antiquity possessed extensive knowledge about pregnancy, childbirth, and female reproductive health. They knew how to identify complications. They had techniques to assist difficult births. They used medicinal plants to control pain, prevent infection, and treat postpartum problems. This knowledge was transmitted from master to apprentice for generations. But during the witch hunt periods, midwives became primary targets. They were accused of using black magic. They were tortured until they confessed to having pacts with demons. They were burned alive in public squares. And when an experienced midwife was executed, all the knowledge she had accumulated over decades of practice died with her. Generations of wisdom about women's health were deliberately exterminated. The result was that for centuries, European women gave birth assisted by male physicians who had theoretical training but no practical experience, who often caused more harm than good, and who had horrific maternal and infant mortality rates because they didn't know what they were doing. Meanwhile, the knowledge that could have saved these women had been burned along with the midwives who possessed it. Now here's the question you need to ask. Why was all this medical knowledge considered so dangerous? Why did authorities spend so much effort destroying medical texts and executing healers? The answer isn't that the knowledge itself was dangerous. The answer is that it represented alternative authority. If a local healer could treat diseases effectively using knowledge inherited from ancient traditions, people didn't need church-approved physicians. If midwives could assist birth successfully, women didn't need intervention from male authorities. If ancient medical texts could teach anyone with basic education how to treat injuries and diseases, the institutional monopoly on medical knowledge collapsed, and that was unacceptable. Controlling who was permitted to heal and which knowledge was legitimate was a crucial form of social control. Destroying alternative medical knowledge wasn't about protecting people from ineffective treatments. It was about ensuring that only approved authorities had the power to heal. And here's the most disturbing aspect of all this. Even now, in 2025, we don't know the complete extent of what was lost. There's no catalog of all the ancient medical texts that were destroyed. We don't have a list of all the healers who were executed and what knowledge they possessed. We can't quantify how many effective treatments disappeared. All we have are fragments, references in other texts to works that didn't survive, ancient catalogs listing books that no longer exist. And the more you study these fragments, the clearer it becomes how sophisticated ancient medical knowledge was and how devastating its destruction was. Let me conclude with this. Modern medicine is extraordinary. Antibiotics save millions of lives. Modern surgeries can do what would have seemed miraculous 100 years ago. Medical technology continues advancing. But imagine if we hadn't lost 1,000 years of progress. Imagine if medical knowledge from antiquity had been preserved, studied, and continuously developed over the centuries. Imagine if medieval physicians had had access to the complete treatises of Greco-Roman physicians. Imagine if the knowledge of experienced midwives had been documented and transmitted instead of being burned along with them. How many lives could have been saved? How many epidemics could have been controlled? How much suffering could have been avoided? The destruction of ancient medical knowledge wasn't just a historical tragedy. It was a crime against humanity whose consequences we still feel. And the lesson we need to learn is this: knowledge that works should never be destroyed for political or religious reasons. No institution has the right to decide that certain types of wisdom are too dangerous to exist. History shows us repeatedly that when authorities suppress knowledge, it's always ordinary people who suffer, while elites maintain privileged access to information they deny to others. If this video opened your eyes to the truth about the systematic destruction of medical knowledge, subscribe to this channel right now. Activate notifications because algorithms actively work against content that reveals these historical truths. Share this video with everyone who needs to understand how knowledge can be deliberately erased and why. And comment below. Do you think there are effective medical treatments that are still being suppressed today? Or do you believe that now we finally have complete access to all available medical knowledge? The conversation starts here.